All right, everybody, we are going to get started. Thank you again for staying with us this afternoon. All right, well, good afternoon. My name is Amanda Brothman. I'm the Communication Director for PHRC, and I will be your moderator for this session. We are excited to have you with us today, a group of professionals who offer services and support through their organizations for individuals with disabilities. So I want to welcome our panelists. We have Ryan Hyde, the Executive Director for the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. Ryan began his career with OVR as an intern at the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation's OVR's York Bureau of Vocational Rehabilitation Services District Office in 2002, where he worked as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, serving students with disabilities in Lancaster County. After working as a VRC for several years, he was selected to become a vocational rehabilitation specialist in OVR's Bureau of Central Operations, focusing on supported employment. Since then, Ryan has held many roles and responsibilities within BVRS and BCO, working on key initiatives such as the OVR budget, case reviews, the implementation of the workforce management system. Wait, I got lost. Of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act and all related services, and the development of OVR's case management system. Ryan was promoted to VCO Bureau Director in 2013 and was asked to be the OVR Acting Director in 2018. Ryan also worked in the Bureau of Workforce Development Administration as the Deputy Bureau Director, where he supervised the units focused on services to youth and oversight monitoring, wrote for competitive grants, and led the implementation of Skill Up PA. In March of 2022, Ryan was again appointed to the role of Acting Executive Director of OVR and worked to address a variety of issues facing the agency as a result of the pandemic. In February of 2023, Ryan was appointed as the Executive Director of OVR. Ryan has a bachelor's and master's in counselor education with a focus of rehabilitation from the Penn State University. He grew up in Bedford County, but now resides with his wife, 2 sons, and their dog, Cosmo, in Lancaster. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you.
Please also welcome Janetta Williams-Green, the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Independent Living of Central PA. Janetta has been a dedicated member of the Center for Independent Living of Central PA since 1989, bringing a wealth of knowledge and experience to her role. She holds a bachelor's of social work degree from Alderson Broaddus College in Philippi, West Virginia, and a master's in business administration from Eastern University in St. David's, PA. With over 40 years of experience in the field, Ms. Green has devoted 38 years specifically to independent living centers, having worked in various positions ranging from receptionist and skills trainer to program manager, Chief Operating Officer, and ultimately the Chief Executive Officer. Her extensive expertise extends beyond her roles within the organization, as she has also served as a non-federal peer reviewer for the U.S. Department of Education Rehabilitation Services Region 2 for 4 years. Furthermore, Ms. Green is a certified aging in place specialist through the National Association of Home Builders. She is also a certified accessibility inspector through the International Code Council and a certified ADA coordinator through the University of Missouri, demonstrating her comprehensive understanding of accessibility standards and the Americans with Disabilities Act. With her remarkable background and qualifications, Ms. Green is a valued asset to the Center for Independent Living of Central PA. Welcome. And finally, we have Representative Ismail Smith-Waddell from the 49th District, which represents Lancaster County. Prior to his election to the PA legislature, Representative Izzy was the president of the Lancaster City Council, on which he has served since 2017. During his 4 years on council, Izzy helped secure the largest investment in affordable housing and lead removal for the city of Lancaster in its history. He championed the decriminalization of cannabis, a completely revamped use of force policy for police officers, and increased police accountability in response to community requests. Izzy was born and raised in Lancaster. After graduating from Carnegie Mellon University, he returned to his hometown and began working in Lancaster's nonprofit sector to deliver relief to vulnerable people, first in behavioral health and drug and alcohol rehabilitation, then as a grant writer and researcher. As a program specialist at Lancaster County Homeless Coalition, he coordinated services and support for Lancaster County's housing insecure community. Most recently, Izzy launched Refresh Lancaster, a mobile hygiene unit which delivers showers, social services, and medical attention to homeless Lancasterians. Izzy has fought for grassroots change in his community as the vice chair of the Lancaster County Democratic Party and as a community organizer with striking Kellogg's workers for fair wages and benefits and PA's educators to demand fair funding for public schools. He's raised his voice to protect abortion access, defend Black lives, welcome immigrants and refugees, and denounce anti-Semitism. He is also, we'll end here. It's a long bio. He is also the first Black and first queer state representative from Lancaster County. Welcome to our panel. So that is everyone's introduction. So let's get started with this conversation today. Start with my first question, and this one is directed mostly to Ryan and Janetta, but Representative Izzy, if you want to jump in, you can. The question is, please tell us a little bit about your organization and your role and what services your organization provides. Ryan, we'll start with you.
Okay, great. Is that coming through? Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be here with you today. So the Pennsylvania Office of Vocational Rehabilitation is housed in the Department of Labor and Industry, and we provide services for people with disabilities to obtain or maintain employment and or their independence. So we do that through 21 offices across the state. We have 15 Bureau of Vocational Rehab Services offices that serve all disability types except for blindness or visual impairment. And then we have 6 offices across the state that serve individuals who are blind or visually impaired. We also have the Hiram G. Andrews Center and the Commonwealth Technical Institute, which is up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And it is a school specifically designed for people with disabilities. There's 10 programs up there, 3, I believe, associate degree programs, and then 7 diploma or certificate programs ranging from culinary to automotive tech to welding to information technology and networking and several others. The Hiram G. Andrews Center has a ton of supports for mental health, physical disabilities, accessibility, accommodations, assistive technology to make sure that any student going there will be successful. Through our 21 offices, we provide services as defined under the Federal Rehabilitation Act, which is Title IV of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. What's great about OVR is that we are very flexible in what we can do, and what is challenging about OVR is that we are very flexible in what we can do. The Rehab Act really, if it's related to somebody becoming employed, usually, almost always, OVR can do it. And we provide a ton of services to folks throughout the year. One of our largest expenditures is on post-secondary education. So it could be college, university training, or business trade technical schools. This past year, we spent almost $20 million on students with disabilities who are going on to post-secondary after high school. We provide job coaching and services like that, purchase hearing aids, we purchase assistive technology, computers, wheelchairs, prosthetics, again, anything somebody would need to be able to become employed. And of course, our most important service is our staff, which most of our staff are vocational rehab counselors with master's degrees, and they provide one-on-one counseling services to help someone determine what their vocational goal might be, and then align services so that they can obtain them. So that's a real high-level overview. Most of our money comes from the federal government. We're 78.7, 21.3% split between federal and state funds. So we are a match program. So the state must buy their federal money for the VR program. So through the state legislature, in the budget, there's a VR transfer line. Then we use that money to match. It's basically 4-to-1 federal dollars, but you can't get that federal money if you don't have the state. So the state money is extremely important. And our total budget is 188, 190, something like that. Right now, goes up through a formula every year and depends on how much match we get from the state. And really Pennsylvania, former Governor Wolf and current Governor Shapiro and the state legislator have been very fortunate for OVR. We have had enough state match for many years to be able to draw all of our federal funds and then some. We've been able to get up what's commonly referred to as sweep up money from other states who can't use all their funds. So we've been very fortunate here in Pennsylvania, and we have a lot of great programs, which I know you're going to ask me about later. So.
Okay, so for the Center for Independent Living of Central Pennsylvania, there are about 15 other centers for independent living in the state. Every county is covered by a Center for Independent Living. They may have different names, but every county has a Center for Independent Living. What's really unique about Centers for Independent Living in Pennsylvania is we are all nonprofits. We're all separate, individualized, but we have 5 core services. Some of us have 4, but we have 5 core services that we're mandated to provide. That's information and referral about disability services, peer counseling services, or peer mentoring, as we also call it. We also do independent living skills training. Somebody's counting this for me, right? 3? I'm at 3. Okay. Peer counseling, independent living skills training, nursing home transition, which is also includes youth transition, and some CILs are even Centers for Independent Living are also CILs. Some CILs are also providing criminal justice transition out of the justice system. And there's one more I'm missing. Advocacy, the big one that all Centers for Independent Living do. We advocate not only for individuals, but at a systems level, at the state and local level, advocating for services, advocating for equitable services, resources in the state. Our Center for Independent Living covers 5 counties. We cover Cumberland, Dauphin, Perry, Mifflin, and Juniata counties. We, in addition to the 5 core services that I mentioned, we also have a home care agency. So we provide attendant care or personal assistant services in the home. We also do ADA technical assistance, where we offer our services to businesses about how they can make their places more accessible. But not only are we looking at physical access, we're also looking at programs and services access. We also have, I should also say that we provide services to all people with disabilities, all ages, doesn't matter the disability. That's very unique in Centers for Independent Living too. Our staff and board, over 51% of our staff and board are mandated to be people with disabilities. So you have people who are planning the services, providing the services, that live the services and have the experience of living with a disability on a daily basis. And I think that's it for now.
Well, as a follow-up to that for both of you, how would an individual request services from your organization? Jenna, would you like to start?
Okay, so remember, we're only in the 5 counties, so this is not a statewide figure. Between information and referral and direct services, we probably hit a little over 1,000 a year.
And how would they go about requesting those services?
Anybody can contact us through our website by calling us. Different organizations make referrals to us. It's just open. Anybody can make the referral. PHRC is welcome to make referrals to us. I love to partner with other organizations and collaborate. Word of mouth has been our biggest referral source. Other consumers or people with disabilities who hear about our services, receive our services. That's how we get referrals. I should mention, and I forgot to do this because this is one of the things I'm most proud of, is we have a fully accessible mobile office that we take to all 5 of our counties so we can reach our rural areas. And that's been a big way for us to reach out to people in the rural areas that, don't have transportation to come down to Harrisburg.
Thank you. Ryan?
Yeah, sure. So PAOVR, we serve anywhere in a year, maybe 40 individuals. In the past, before the pandemic, it was probably closer to 50. So we're still kind of building back up following the pandemic. Active caseloads is probably around 30. So, we open and close cases throughout the year. We're not a lifetime service. People come to us, get services, and then we close their case. So we might have 30-some thousand active cases a year. Interestingly enough, about 15,000 of those are now what we would consider youth or students with disabilities. So we serve a ton of young people, and that has shifted probably in the last 10 years with some changes to our federal law requiring that we provide more services to students with disabilities. So that it's working, but our population is definitely changing. And as I'm sure most people in this room are aware, we're also seeing a significant increase in the number of neurodivergent individuals that we serve. So, inventing new services, trying new services has become, very important for us. To get involved with OVR, there's a bunch of different ways. So of course we are online. You can look up PAOVR on the web and apply through there. We have the 21 offices, as I mentioned. You can show up at an office and someone will help you complete an application. The referral online is relatively simple. We also have staff that go out into the high schools. Either early reach coordinators or our counselors will go out to high schools and work with students to open cases. So our counselors are out in the community. You can show up at a career link. Most career links will have an OVR staff either there every day or a couple days a week. We will take applications through that process. So there's a bunch of different avenues to get services from OVR.
Thank you. And so our next question is directed to Representative Smith-Waddell. I would like you to talk about your involvement with assisting people with disabilities and also how that translates into the state legislature.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, can I be heard with the left? Am I good? Thank you. So also, this is extremely helpful. So way to walk the walk in terms of I'm a person who very, very much benefits from subtitles, closed captions, especially hard-coded ones. Anyway, that's very helpful. So I'm going to take a step back, actually, before my career as a legislator. I think probably the place where I've most interacted with the highest number of folks with disabilities who have needs that are being unmet on a personal or a structural level is working with unhoused individuals, homeless individuals, whichever your preferred term is, because honestly, there are a lot of things that we take for granted in being sheltered and having a home or an apartment, and those challenges, the accessibility challenges, become exacerbated greatly when you don't have a regular place to lay your head. So I think the two places where I have most interacted with these things are in the accessibility of our shelters in Lancaster County. Oftentimes communities won't have a dedicated shelter space. They have a school gymnasium, they have a church basement, and the building might be 100 years old. They might not have an elevator or a ramp. What they have is a steep staircase. And that becomes a real challenge for many of our folks. The other is absolutely in the space of addiction. I have gotten 3 or 4 calls in my office, which were surprising to me, that really orient around folks' relationship to the Americans with Disabilities Act and their addiction or recovery status. And so, on the community side, that's taken 2 forms. One is, we have a lot of folks who object to having recovery houses, halfway houses, treatment centers in their communities. And, I've had to tell a number of folks, really, ultimately, we need to rethink how we engage, because what we're talking about actually constitutes a form of discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And on a similar token, I had a woman call my office 2 months ago. She has been trying to find a placement for her husband who is in need of nursing home care, who has not been able to find a reputable institution across the state because he also requires Suboxone treatment. And many nursing homes either simply don't provide it or refuse to provide it, which again, I believe is an ADA issue. And so once you start to see these things, I hesitate to use the word radicalize, but once you start to see the ways in which we sort of push folks with disabilities to the fringes of our society and really deny them sort of the basic things that they need to engage as full members of our community, you see them everywhere. And so I think that's really informed a lot of my work in the legislature. I'm fortunate to sit on the Housing, Education, and Human Services Committee, all three of which have strong dovetails with this. And some of the really great legislation that we've seen come out, I think my favorite piece of legislation, if I can give a plug for my colleague, Dr. Tarek Khan, is Michael's Law. And in terms of folks' ability just to be people, I think as a first order priority, what Michael's Law would do is simply this. If you have to have an aide, if you have, for whatever reason, another person who provides care for you, and you want to access a museum, an art gallery, a concert venue, et cetera, essentially it would provide for that person not to be charged for attending alongside you. Because what we often have is folks with disabilities essentially double paying to go to the publicly available events, arts, culture, what have you, that we have throughout the Commonwealth. And as we all well know, when you're living with a chronic illness or a disability, money can frequently be very tight. And so having to pay for 2 museum tickets, 2 concert tickets, et cetera. And sometimes I think if you don't have, I'm actually very excited to hear this about your board, Janetta. If you don't have lived experience or contact with folks who have that lived experience, stuff like that escapes you. And I think that's probably the next big step that the legislature can take, is to look program-wide across the Commonwealth and say, where are we making life more difficult than it has to be for folks with disabilities? So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So this next question is also for you, and it's a little complex, so
Let's
bear
go.
with me. What legislation do you think is necessary to not only address the needs of those at the intersection of disability, but also LGBTQ and communities of color?
Yeah, so a lot of the, let me back up a step. I call folks at the PAHRC with some frequency. So if you work for the Human Relations Commission, let me go ahead and thank you for the work that you do right now, either for legislation or on behalf of a constituent who may come into my office. And so some of this is absolutely, first and foremost, clarifying protections in law that the HRC understands as a matter of their practice. So for example, the Human Relations Commission is ahead of the Pennsylvania legislature on non-discrimination in housing, public accommodations, and employment for LGBTQ plus individuals. We passed the Fairness Act out of the House for the first time in 22 years, a couple of months ago. But thank you. It's great. And we're working on the Senate, but when we talk to our colleagues at the HRC, they say this is already our understanding. We already understand the protection of sex to cover these things, and we are going to enforce that protection as though that were the case. So kudos to y'all. But clarifying those things in law, I think, is first and foremost very important, so that there can be no equivocation, and frankly, so that we can create an affirmative environment instead of just a non-discriminatory one. That I think is very important, because many folks do not have the wherewithal, or it may not even occur to them to attempt to file a complaint with their local or state Human Relations Commission or seek a lawyer. So I think that's first and foremost. The other is, and this is legislation in the sense that the budget is legislation. Nature of the beast, things cost money. At the end of the day, we have to figure out how to pay for them, but there's really no way to create an anti-discriminatory environment in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania without spending some dollars, spending some ducats. And one of the things that we've most been talked about this year as legislators is coming from the intellectual disability and home care communities, where the state acts as the primary payer, reimbursing folks for services that they provide with folks to disabilities. And knowing that, pardon me, that there is in the LGBTQ plus community a higher percentage, some might call it disproportionate, I just call it higher, of representation of disabilities and of homelessness. Increasing what we, the state, reimburse for these services is going to help ensure that there is a qualified workforce to actually do the job. Because what we're doing essentially is outsourcing our responsibility to care for Pennsylvanians in need. And if you're trying to do a hard job that requires skill and compassion, additional certifications, and if you're trying to do that all day and you're getting paid 12, 13 an hour, you might, and reasonably so, leave for greener pastures, which means that there is a person in need that we in the Commonwealth are responsible for who is not getting the services that they deserve. And I know I'm talking too long. I cannot underscore this thing enough. When we talk to folks who provide home care or intellectual disability or accessibility services, there is a perception out there that could not be more wrong, that essentially what these folks are doing is glorified babysitting. First of all, that's demeaning to their clients, and it's demeaning to their skill level. And the example I often tell people is this: many folks, for whatever reason, are hard of hearing, deaf, or nonverbal, and so they communicate and need to be communicated with using American Sign Language. For the staff in my office, we go way out of our way to recruit individuals who speak Spanish. My district is 40% Latino. The ability to speak or communicate in another language, on top of having the compassion, on top of having the flexibility, on top of having the education to do that job, that's not somebody who should be paid right around the minimum wage or just above it, because that combination of skills is hard to find. And it's really time that the Commonwealth start compensating folks who do that job in a way that's commensurate with the incredible skill and the incredible emotional toll that the job takes. I'll put my soapbox away now.
Thank you. This one is for all of you. What advice do you have for employers or government agencies that are trying to become more disabled inclusive?
I'll go first. Just do it. Frankly, it seems scary, but it's not. People are people, and you just have to talk to them and say, what are your needs? Like, do you need a higher desk? Like, that's a very common thing. Do you need a quiet space? Do you need headphones? Like, the type of accommodations that most people need are very straightforward. They're very low in expense. And I'll give you an example. I'll cheat on this question because I know programs that I'm proud of is a question too. But like right now, we have the Commonwealth Summer Internship Program, and there's 200 and some interns probably throughout the Commonwealth this summer, but there are 30 that come from OVR. And they are college students with disabilities who are in all kinds of majors, and they're placed in various Commonwealth entities, PennDOT, Ag, LNI, OVR has some. OA has some. They're all doing different stuff based on their major, from accounting to coding to marketing to whatever. And the first couple years that we did this, the supervisors were, a little nervous. Maybe they hadn't worked with somebody who used a wheelchair, somebody who was blind. And we do debrief with them at the end, and they're like, this has been the best experience we've ever had with an intern. It completely changed the culture of our organization. And we now know, how to interact and what to ask and, all that stuff. And no one has come to us and said, we're not doing that again. It's been an absolute positive experience. And, it really does come down to just getting that entity, that employer to just say, yeah, we'll give it a chance. And with the labor market the way it is, people with disabilities are an untapped resource that we as a state and as a country need to tap into. So it's more important than ever that the SILs, the OVR are out there and available to help with that process.
We'd like to see it advertised more that businesses are open to hiring people with disabilities. So encouraging people with disabilities to apply on job announcements would be beneficial. Also, depending on the size of your organization, we'd like to see more people designated as ADA coordinators, people who learn more about the ADA and how to implement it and how to help the staff who need accessibility or reasonable accommodations. But also to remember that Centers for Independent Living are a great resource. We're out in the community. We're employers too. We hire people with disabilities. We probably have an immense amount of expertise in reasonable accommodations if needed. Plus, we have people who can also serve as peer mentors for staff. It's finding out social and recreational. There's just so much that Centers for Independent Living can do to help employers and their staff.
Did you have anything you wanted to include? Okay. Our last question before we open up to the guests. Do you have any advice for individuals with disabilities who are looking to join the workforce? And how about those who may already be in the workforce, but are struggling and need assistance or support? Anyone can go first.
I'll go. So again, reach out to OVR. That is our mission and purpose. That is what the federal and state funds are for, to help individuals become successfully, gainfully employed, not just employed, but hopefully a lifelong career where they've built skills that can carry them, for their lifetime, so they can earn a wage that supports themselves, supports their families. We have a ton of different programs. I mentioned the college thing. I mentioned supported employment, but I've lost track of how many different programs, and I'll talk about one that I'm super excited about, which is the My Work program. So right now, this summer, we have 750 students across the state participating in our My Work program. My Work stands for municipalities and youth, and then just work. And we partner with local counties, boroughs, townships, cities, rec centers, whatever. And we put students with disabilities in those places doing whatever they need done for the summer. We pay the wages. We also pay for a support person or kind of a job coach to be there if needed. Like I said, there's 750 of them. There's 150 locations now across the state. We're not in every county, but we're almost gonna be in every county, and probably by next year we should be in every county. Some counties have multiple locations, but these are fantastic opportunities to showcase what students with disabilities, people with disabilities can do. They are often outside in the visible eye of the community. They're doing park cleanup, they're painting baseball fields, they're doing maintenance, they're doing landscaping, they're doing mowing, they could be in the office answering phones, doing clerical. I've been to a bunch of these, and I've got several more to go to yet this summer, but the township, borough, county people just can't say enough great things about it. The kids are hardworking. The students are hardworking. I'll stop saying kids. The students are hardworking, and they're getting these great paid work learning experiences over the summer that's going to be able to carry them into their next, either their career or their post-secondary experience. And they're making a network where they can put on their resume, I worked for this county or this city or this borough for the summer. I did these things, and they'll have a reference that somebody can call and say, this is, Ryan did a great job. So it's really a fantastic program, and there's bunches of those, and there's many others. So just really excited about that stuff. But get involved. If you're working with people and they want to talk employment, we pay for benefits counseling. We have, again, master's level vocational rehab counselors. Most are certified rehab counselors who dedicated their education and their career to helping people understand, their disabilities, their barriers, their abilities, and connecting the dots with service providers like the SILs throughout their community, and determining if education is appropriate, if going directly into the workforce is appropriate. They help with job hunting, they help with resume, they help with mock interviews and interviewing skills. We also pay on the job training contracts, and this is something that's really starting to kick off this year, kind of coming out of that pandemic, flatline. We are getting a lot more requests for on-the-job training. We're reimbursing 100% wages for at least 90 days for our customers. So if an employer is interested in hiring a person with a disability and they're an OVR customer, we will reimburse that wage for the first 90 days. So there's lots of incentives that we can help coordinate and offer, just to make sure that that person gets their foot in the door and has all the supports that they need.
I would say you're your own best advocate. So communication, you know what you're going to need to be successful on the job. And if you're uncomfortable, contact a Center for Independent Living, that we can help you through that process.
The only way in which I would add to what both of my colleagues have said is just to reaffirm for folks that, I don't know how to put it. If you are somebody who has a neurodivergence or really any kind of disability or neurodivergence, I think oftentimes we go into the workplace, public environments, and because they are not built for us, we come away with this feeling like maybe we've lost our mind, like maybe we're doing something wrong by speaking up or asking for something different. And the only thing that I'd say is, you haven't lost your mind. This is a world that was not designed for us. And so, we are going to be the primary agents of redesigning it. And also to know, coming from like a city perspective, that you advocating for yourself or others, you reaching out to organizations like this, you're making the world better for yourself, for other folks with disabilities or differences, and really for everybody. So the pat example I give to folks is when folks, used to ask, why does the city spend so much money on making sidewalks ADA accessible, making the curb cuts, that's X amount of money and it's for a really specific, group of people. First of all, everybody deserves to be able to use the sidewalk, right? Like that's first. But secondly, if I can tell that person I'm talking to has never pushed a stroller, for example. When we advocate for folks with disabilities and see those changes realized in the real world, life gets better and more accessible for everybody. Is kind of what I'll close with.
Thank you all so much. So we're going to open it now to audience questions. Looks like Brittany has one.
We're here. All right, we've got a couple questions in the chat from our online attendees. There are a couple questions about coverage under the ADA and the definition of disability, whether that includes alcohol addiction and drug addiction, and whether the definition of disability changes, whether it's under Social Security or Veterans Affairs.
I think we should refer them to the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center. I don't know if everybody's familiar with the ADA or the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center, which is a resource that you can contact if you have questions about accessibility. I don't want to give advice that might be wrong or say, answer what I think, which might be wrong. So for me personally, I would just refer them either to PHRC or the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center.
Yeah, for ADA specific questions, I think that's the right call. Although we're all familiar with the ADA, if you want to look up those specific answers, I think that's the best. Just to broadly answer for OVR, OVR serves all types of disabilities, including, I think the question was drug and alcohol, mental health, neurodiverse, physical, emotional, all of them. You just have to apply for services, and then a counselor will ask you questions about your disability or impairment. We'll get some diagnostic information from your doctors if you have it. If not, we'll send you for testing. And once we have that, that's required under our federal law to have some of that documentation. And then they'll determine if you're eligible. Right now, OVR has an order of selection, which is basically like a priority for services, but all of our categories are currently open. We're serving basically, everyone. So I would encourage people to, refer them to OVR if they're interested, even if they're just interested in talking about employment. Maybe they're curious, maybe they need to understand how it's going to impact their life, their benefits. That's what the counselors are for. So I would definitely encourage that. And to anybody in the room, I've talked about OJTs. I've talked about the internship programs. We have a nice internship program with the SILs as well. Some of the SILs have taken our college interns. If you're a part of an organization and you would like an intern, we have plenty more. So we'll pay the wages. We'll pay those wages for the summer or during the school year. So if you're interested in OJTs, you're interested in taking an intern, reach out to us and we will make that happen.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, looks like Brittany has another one.
All right, another question from the chat. A participant asks, how do you encourage your clients to want to work?
I think from an OVR perspective, motivation definitely usually comes from themselves. They come to us because they've made that decision that they're interested in it, or their family is interested in them becoming employed. We spend a lot of time in the schools, as I mentioned. 15,000 or more of our customers are youth. So we spend a lot of time in schools talking about work, talking about what the working world is like, what employer expectations are like. And I think there's a bunch of different reasons what that motivate people. Some want to be, provide service. Some want to be part of their community. Of course, everybody wants to make money and spend money, go out to dinner, go to the movies, whatever they want to do with their life. So I think there's a variety of motivations. Counselors are very important. The SILs are very important in that. Our counselors spend a lot of time if needed. Some people don't need as much assistance, but if they need, some motivation, if they need some check-ins, some counseling, that's what our staff does, day in and day out. Again, that's the whole intent of the Rehab Act at the federal level, is to help people figure this stuff out and, become successfully employed.
And for Centers for Independent Living, our primary focus is not on employment, but it's on living in the community, living independently in the community. So our consumers are usually coming to us for some other reason. But if we make sure that they have the resources that they need to live in the community, sometimes employment follows that. If they have, attendant care, and then they have transportation, they have housing, then employment usually is like the next step, but it's not something that we push people towards.
Yes, another question.
Hello, my name is Paula Sorockman Inzera. I work for PHRC, but I'm in a very unique role in that I'm a parent caregiver. So our rep from Lancaster, I'm curious if you, in your roles, I know you're more on the legislative side, but the stakeholders in that venue, or of course parents, because that's what you get feedback from, but it's also the insurance company, medical assistants, things like that. So when you get parent feedback, you get a whole different realm of it, I'm sure. But my son's specific company is UPMC for me. A year ago, I started giving feedback, other parents also did. And now, a year later, my son is 17, he'll be 18 in about 6 months. UPMC has come back based on a lot of the feedback that we have been giving as parents. They have one employee who now does this type of programming and getting our children who are dependent into work programs, doing things that they had to wait for waiver funds to come into place 5, 6, 7 years from now. So I don't know if you're aware that UPMC has one employee who's now doing this. Her caseload is now overwhelmed. And do you want her number for my case manager so you can meet and get all this coordinated and make sure they're getting this stuff done? Because I was like, I'm literally like having phone calls with them almost every couple of weeks now. They've actually said they have the government approving my child for these services. The service they're putting in is Pathways, which is near my house. It's a United Way program. If they can get them in, the UPMC has called them 6 months. They're expecting to have an opening for them. And UPMC says, what kind of call it, we're graduating the kids. They're taking these kids that are typically in the gray area, who are already in these types of things, and getting them this because it's a caregiver issue also. It doubles up. I am lucky to have an aide today to be with my child, and it's not babysitting. If you know, it's really not. And I'm glad you pointed that out, because that is a very difficult thing when I'm saying, yeah, my child, he's 17, he's almost 18. He cannot be left unsupervised. And there are other parent caregivers in here who have similar issues. I'm here because I have an aide for my child. Sometimes she, I said, like, I didn't have one for many months, and now I have one. So if UPMC now has one person who can do this, who can deal with, at least at that level, this gray area, I mean, obviously they can't deal with every issue, and they're able to get that in there. I mean, are you aware of this, for one? Two, is there any way to get this expanded so it's not just one employee at UPMC? Because obviously they work with the government to get this funded. So I don't even know if you're aware that they're even doing that right now.
First of all, thank you, Paula. Yes, I am aware of this. And the reason is Representative Dan Miller of Allegheny County hosts an annual disability summit, where this year, I'm a new legislator. I've been in the role about 8 months. And so this was something that we discussed at the summit. But strategically, I mean, this feels like it is primarily, we've crossed like the awareness threshold. I think if most legislation is in, there's 2 parts, right? There's, okay, are people aware of it? Are they willing to do something about it? And are the resources there to expand into this specific niche, which is where it sounds like the conversation needs to go next. And sort of my first question coming out of here is, okay, so UPMC has this. What about AmeriHealth? What about Highmark? What about, kind of whatever? And that's not an answer that I have, but my guess is probably not. Maybe somebody in the room could correct me, but that seems like the next place to go with it. And I'm happy to catch up more with you once we're off stage to talk about that a little bit.
Brittany has another question from the chat.
All right, another question from the chat. It's about how your agencies work to help individuals with disabilities navigate architectural barriers in historical buildings that are not fully accessible for individuals with disabilities.
Well, accessibility is kind of like, it depends. There's not an answer that will cover everything. It really depends on the situation. For our organization, if somebody is having issues with accessibility and they've talked with the facility and they can't get it resolved, I would encourage them to contact us and we will work with them in addressing those issues and networking with the Mid-Atlantic ADA Center in trying to get it resolved.
You know, OVR works with employers, schools, every day to you know, support our customers. We offer a free service to do an ADA accommodation or an ADA accessibility review. So we have staff that are trained on the ADA toolkit. That was created several years ago. So we will go out to a site free of charge and do an ADA review. We are not the ADA police. We can give recommendations. Whether an organization or an employer or a facility takes those recommendations, that's up to them. The Department of Labor and Industry, not part, you know, OVR is part of Labor and Industry, but at a higher level or a different level within Labor and Industry, there is an accessibility advisory board, and they do look at all construction permitting, and if a waiver is needed because of it's a historical building or it's not feasible to put in, say, a ramp or an elevator or a lift or whatever, they do have to go through a process through that committee. And that committee consists of individuals with disabilities, particularly the chair. I believe he's still the chair. I was a former executive director of OVR with a physical disability. There's state representatives or their designee on there. And then there's architects on there. So they're looking at blueprints. They will sometimes request that the owner of the property bring their architect in either for a virtual or a physical, you know, in-person presentation. And then they're going to make the decision on whether a waiver is granted or not for that particular location. And, you know, Pittsburgh comes to mind. I was on this committee for several years ago. Pittsburgh came up a lot because if you've ever been to Pittsburgh, it's very hilly and there's lots of old buildings. It's not always feasible to put a ramp in without basically either destroying the building or changing the structural integrity of a building. Because of the slopes that they're dealing with, you know, ramps would have to be, you know, out into the street basically was a common problem that we would, and if you've ever been to Pittsburgh, then the streets, in some of the older places are very narrow, so it just wouldn't work. So there's that kind of review process that, you know, construction would go through. Obviously, new construction has very specific rules on accessibility. Old construction or updating an older construction, there is this process that L&I does manage.
Any other questions? All right, well, I have one last question for everybody, and that is, do you have any specific success stories that you'd like to share with us?
Does it have to be employment related?
No.
Well, in addition to our accessible mobile office, we have started an adaptive sports program in Central PA. So we have a wheelchair rugby team, and we are always looking for new players. And we have started a youth wheelchair basketball team. And we have kids from 8 years old up to 16. So they're always looking for new players as well. And it's such a great social recreational opportunity for kids with disabilities and the adults too, to get together, socialize. Peer mentoring is amazing. The confidence that you can see just over like one season of playing basketball, some of them for the very first time, it's just very rewarding. So, and just to put a plug in, if you're in Harrisburg, next Friday down at Broad Street Market, we are celebrating the ADA anniversary. So on Broad Street Market, 10 to 2, come join us there.
My success story, I think, for this is it's a little wonky, so bear with. But when I was on city council, as was mentioned in the quite thorough biography that they pulled down for me,
You can thank your staff for that.
will do. We put out an RFP for affordable housing or for the creation of additional affordable housing with the proviso that what we invest in is net new units. And I don't know if anybody's seeing this coming as I'm talking. This created a problem for a couple of our local providers who wanted to expand their shelter and housing offerings to include fully ADA accessible units because they're larger and the footprint of the building isn't changing. Adding these ADA units would essentially disqualify them from these funds. And so we were able to go and working with our own guidelines and some of the ARPA and state guidelines, make that correction. And we're now in the process of working with other municipalities who are doing really this same kind of thing and putting these funds out there for affordable housing in making sure that the housing that they are providing for can include, these additional ADA accessible units within their guidelines, which is not like, it's not a good newspaper human interest story, but the most common, at least nationally, the most common fair housing complaint is disability accessibility in housing. So, proud for Lancaster to be doing what work it can in that space. That's what I got.
Great. Like I said, you've heard about several of our programs. This summer, we will invest about $15 million in our pre-employment transition services for students with disabilities. During the pandemic, we were not able to really do anything with that because the schools were closed and we couldn't get the students out. So we're coming out swinging this year. We did some last year, but this year we're getting back to where we were pre-pandemic. And it's the My Works. We hosted the Blind and Visual Services Summer Academy up at Penn State. 10 days, students with visual impairments were up there learning to use a white cane, assistive technology, how to ask for accommodations, how to live with a roommate, how to be independent. Right now at Penn State, we have the Deaf and Hard of Hearing Summer Academy, all that same stuff, except students are deaf and hard of hearing. These are all students that are eventually going to go on to college. There are interpreters there. There's CART running in the background. There's, bunches of different technologies, FM loops, laptops, active transcription, but they're learning all that same stuff on how to go away and be successful at the college level. So we got a lot going on, and I think it's really a cool thing to see these programs come back because they were shut down for a couple years. And I've been in many of them, and just being able to interact with the students is very life-changing. It's life-changing for them, but it's life-changing for the people who coordinate these things and who attend these. Secretary Walker for LNI has been extremely supportive. She's been to several of these events and just can't say enough about how impactful they are. So we have a lot going on. I mentioned $20 million spent on post-secondary education for our students. So we're seeing our services kind of rebirth, and it's exciting. And Our board, OVR, is governed by a state board that is a mix of people with disabilities, advocates, professors, et cetera. They approved some motions for us this June, basically raising our financial needs test amount to $100,000, which basically eliminates a financial needs test for our customers. So there's no cost really to participate in VR services. They've expanded the amount of tuition that we reimburse to $14,122 per year, which aligns with the Shippensburg rate, which is the highest state system of higher ed tuition rate. There's just lots of great stuff that's happening. We're in a very fortunate position with funding, which, careful to say that because, 2 years from now, you might be yelling at me, but because of the pandemic, we weren't able to spend all of our federal funds. So we're able to carry that over. So we've been working on spending down those federal funds, but the financial needs test, the extra tuition, those are all a direct result of our board taking action. And because we have extra federal funds as a result of not being able to spend our normal amount during the pandemic, that's going to continue. Like the carryover process is going to continue for us for 3 to 5 years, maybe longer. It's hard to see much further than that, but now is the time. If you're working with somebody who's interested in employment, who is interested in going on to school, and they have a disability, like get them connected with OVR, because they're going to get more than maybe they would have 5-10 years ago.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us today for this fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you just stick around for a minute, we have something for all of you. Just hang out here on the stage.